You have probably seen the photographs. Iran in the 1970s. Modern city streets, Western fashion, a country that looked like it was racing toward the future. And then Iran after 1979, an Islamic Republic, governed by religious law. The two images are barely 50 years apart. So how does a country transform that completely, that fast, in the span of a single decade? The usual answer is simple. Religion defeated the modern world. But that answer hides what actually happened. And what actually happened did not begin with religion at all. It began with oil. Because the Iranian Revolution was never simply a war between faith and modernity, underneath it lay a long chain of causes: foreign control of Iran's oil, a coup that shattered a king's legitimacy, and a ruler who set out to modernize his country faster than almost any nation in history. The strange truth is that the Shah's own modernization helped create the forces that destroyed him. To understand how Iran arrived at 1979, you have to go back decades before it. Start with a fact that shaped everything else about modern Iran. For most of the 20th century, it was a country other powers desperately wanted to control. Iran sat in a place that made it impossible to ignore, rich in resources and caught between empires. In both world wars, foreign armies marched across it, British, Soviet, and later American forces, each claiming they had to be there to keep the others out. During the Second World War, Britain and the Soviet Union occupied the country outright, and the ruling Shah gave up his throne to his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Iran had learned a hard lesson. Its fate was rarely fully in its own hands. When the war ended and the foreign troops pulled back, Iran was left in turmoil. A dozen political parties competed for power. Tribal leaders, nationalists, communists, and a religious establishment all pushed in different directions, and foreign powers quietly backed whichever side served their interests. Parts of the country even tried to break away. For a time, Iran teetered on the edge of falling apart. But beneath all the political chaos lay one problem bigger than the rest: the economy. And the key to the economy was one thing: oil. Iran had a great deal of it, then as now. But here was the catch. A British company held the rights to nearly all of Iran's oil and took the great majority of the profits, while Iran itself received only a small share. Iranians could see it plainly. Their country's greatest treasure was flowing out, and someone else was growing rich on it. It was a source of deep national resentment. And eventually, one man decided to take it back. His name was Mohammad Mossadegh, and what happened to him would poison the monarchy for a generation. Mossadegh was a nationalist and an aristocrat, and in 1951 he became Iran's prime minister. His signature act was bold and wildly popular. He nationalized the oil industry, declaring that Iran's oil belonged to Iranians. For a country that had watched its wealth flow to foreigners for decades, it felt like independence at last. But nationalizing the oil turned out to be far easier than running it. The entire oil industry had been built and operated by foreigners: the engineers, the technology, the management. Iran suddenly owned it, but barely knew how to run it. And Britain, furious at losing its prize, joined with the United States to impose a crippling blockade on Iranian oil. The country's main source of income was choked off. Mossadegh was also pressing to reduce the Shah's power, insisting the king should reign but not rule. The stage was set for a collision. In 1953, that collision came. The Shah tried to dismiss Mossadegh, and when that failed, briefly fled the country. Then he returned, this time backed by the money and organization of American and British intelligence, in a coup that removed Mossadegh from power and placed him under arrest. Decades later, the United States would formally acknowledge its role in the operation. The elected prime minister was gone, and the Shah was firmly back on his throne. And this is the moment that mattered far more than anyone realized at the time. To a great many Iranians, the lesson of 1953 was unmistakable. Their monarchy had been propped up by foreign powers and had cut down a popular elected leader to do it. The Shah's legitimacy, in the eyes of much of his own people, never fully recovered. It was a wound that would sit quietly for 25 years and then reopen. But first, the Shah, secure in power and rich with oil, set out to remake Iran entirely. What followed was one of the most ambitious attempts at modernization the world had ever seen, launched from the very top. The Shah called it the White Revolution, and its scale was staggering. He redistributed land to millions of peasant families, breaking the old order of great landlords. He poured oil money into industry, factories, roads, ports, banks, and a stock exchange. He built up a powerful military and even launched a nuclear program. He introduced free education, an 8-hour workday, and pensions, and gave women the right to vote. By many measures, Iran was being transformed in a single generation into a modern industrial nation. But there was another side to it. The change was breathtakingly fast, deeply uneven, and imposed from above by a ruler who grew more authoritarian as he went. Dissent was watched and crushed by a feared secret police. The Shah wanted a modern country, but not a free one. He was building a new Iran while refusing to share power in it. And that contradiction would prove fatal. Because here is the paradox at the very heart of the story. The Shah's modernization created the forces that would destroy it. Free education produced a large, young, educated, and increasingly urban population. People with rising expectations who wanted a political voice the Shah would not give them. And his land reforms and his drive to modernize stripped the powerful religious establishment of much of its land and influence, turning the clergy into determined opponents. In building a modern society, the Shah had also built a modern opposition. By the late 1970s, that opposition was ready, and it came together in a way almost no one expected. In 1977 and 1978, protests broke out and spread across the country. And the remarkable thing was who was protesting. It was not one movement, but a broad and unlikely coalition. Liberal Democrats, leftists, students, intellectuals, merchants from the bazaars, and the religious. They disagreed with one another about almost everything, about what Iran should become. But they agreed on one thing. The Shah had to go. And within that coalition, one faction held a decisive advantage. The secular groups were splintered, full of rival visions and competing leaders. But the religious opposition had unity, deep organization, and a single powerful figure to rally around. Years earlier, the Shah had exiled a senior Shia cleric named Ayatollah Khomeini. In exile, Khomeini became a martyr and a symbol. And from abroad, he gave the growing movement a voice and a focus that the scattered secular groups could not match. As the protests swelled, the government answered with force. Martial law was declared, and many people were killed, which only deepened the anger. The economy, battered and increasingly cut off, began to collapse. And still, the crowds grew, marching under Khomeini's banner. Among them even secular Democrats who believed the revolution would bring them freedom. Finally, in early 1979, it became too much. The Shah left the country, and the monarchy that had ruled Iran fell. But now came the real question. Who would inherit the revolution? And the answer would surprise many of the very people who had risked everything to make it happen. The revolution had been the work of a diverse coalition, but in the chaos that followed the Shah's fall, one group proved far better prepared than all the others. While the secular parties were still debating what kind of country Iran should become, the religious movement was already acting. It had organized councils and structures even before the Shah fell, and now it moved quickly, creating a powerful new armed force of its own and organizing a national vote on Iran's future. The result came swiftly. In the spring of 1979, following a referendum, Iran was declared an Islamic Republic, with a senior religious leader as its supreme authority, a position standing above the government itself. A monarchy that had lasted for decades had been replaced, in a matter of months, by something the modern world had rarely seen: a state governed at its highest level by religious law and religious leadership. For the liberals, the leftists, and the secular Democrats, who had also fought to bring down the Shah, this was not the future they had imagined. Many had pictured a democracy, or a free market republic, or a socialist state. Instead, they found themselves out-organized by the one faction that had been readier than all the rest. The revolution had been made by many hands. It was captured by the most disciplined. The new state was built on Islamic law, which reshaped daily life across the country, and it was quickly tested. Within a year, neighboring Iraq invaded the weakened nation, beginning a brutal war that would grind on for most of the next decade. In the years since, the Islamic Republic and its record on rights, on freedoms, and on its role in the wider region have remained among the most fiercely debated subjects in the world, seen very differently inside Iran and beyond it. That debate is far beyond the scope of one short history. But the history itself tells a clear and striking story. The Iranian Revolution was never simply religion defeating the modern world. It was the story of how a king's own breakneck modernization, funded by oil, entangled with foreign powers, and forced from the top down, created the very forces that swept him away. And of how, in the chaos that followed, it was not the largest group, but the most organized one that seized what everyone else had built. Revolutions, it turns out, are made by the many, but they are very often inherited by the few who are ready. This channel is about looking a little more closely at the moments that quietly shape the world we live in. If you enjoy history told this way, stay with us. There is always another story worth telling.